Oh, right. Thanks so much for coming back on the channel. I mean, my Timothy Thatcher video would not be the same without your contributions. So something probably the match I'm most excited for this year is your upcoming final bout with Tim. What does this mean to you to get to do one more time? And is there any way you want to approach it differently, than your previous encounters?
Oh, uh, wow, good question. Right off the get-go. Yeah, it's a big one for me too. Um, and it's one um I don't know that I ever thought it was going to happen again.
Hmm.
And that there would be the right time or place for it to happen again. Um, and then when we started putting together Dean, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But
Hmm.
when the pieces started coming together for Dean, and it was sort of like, well, what match would I like
Hmm.
to be part of for that show? It kind of was the obvious choice for me.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, it's been over five years since the last time or not quite, but 4.5, almost 5 years since we last wrestled. Um, it's the series of matches that really put me on the map, but also for the most part, people didn't really get a chance to see those matches in person because they all happened in Seattle, except for the one that happened in Toronto, which was a part of a tournament. So there was no real like hype or publicity because we didn't know it was happening until we got there to the second round. Um, so for me, it was kind of important to have it take place on a weekend where there are a lot of traveling fans who will be there, people from the East Coast who wouldn't have been at in Seattle for the first three matches. Um, those first three matches were live. The first one wasn't live, but the second two were live on Twitch. But those shows, those 3-2-1 battle shows started at 9 p.m. Pacific.
Ooh, I did
So
not know that.
yeah, so like if you were staying up to watch those 3-2-1 battle shows, they didn't start till midnight Eastern, um, which we actually had a decent amount of viewership from Europe for those matches because it was like Saturday morning for
Hmm.
those people over there, right? So, but the show starts at 8 p.m. Eastern. Dean does on a Thursday night, WrestleMania weekend. So there'll be a lot of people who can watch them live on IWTV, or if they happen to be in Greater Philadelphia for that weekend. So yeah, I mean it's important to me. The platform's important to me. The show means a ton to me, and when it was apparent kind of what the show was, that was the match I wanted more than anything. As far as approaching it differently, um, I don't know. When you have a match like that, someone like that who I feel like I have a really natural chemistry with. Um, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, but you also don't want to just do the same thing you've done in past matches, right? So I'm sure there'll be we'll play some of our greatest hits, like we normally do. And I think there'll be some interesting, turns and nuance. It's been 4.5 years since we last wrestled. It's been over 4 years since I last even was in a room with him. I haven't seen him since just before the pandemic in Germany.
Hmm.
We were over there together on WXW shows, and so and he's become like a regular for Pro Wrestling Noah since then. He's had a cup of coffee in NXT since then,
Hmm.
and I mean, I feel like my mind has maybe grown and improved since then, but I've definitely had a lot of injury issues since then that have slowed me down and are subsequently can be the reason why my career ends this year. Um, so I think we're the same people, and in some ways we've grown, as human beings, as pro wrestlers. So I like to think it's going to be an interesting match, and it's going to be a nice culmination of our year-long feud. So we'll hope. We can hope. We'll see. We'll see.
I mean, I'll definitely be one of the people viewing that entire weekend. That and like Bloodsport or like nights 1 and 2 of WrestleMania for the sickos. So that's gonna be a good weekend. So Thatcher is obviously the one who gets talked the most about in terms of your career opponents. But other than him, who do you think your favorite person has been to wrestle?
Oh, there's so many people. There's so many people. It's really hard to nail it down to one person for sure. There are definitely people who I've had multiple matches with that I think that sometimes you meet someone and you've never met them before and you just jive with them. Like you think similarly. You sometimes you don't even need to say what you're thinking and they pick up on what you have in mind. Um, a couple people that come to mind. Eric Royal is someone who I had a series of matches with in 2021. We um, we were supposed to wrestle WrestleMania weekend 2019 in New Jersey. That ends up getting canceled. We're supposed to wrestle WrestleMania weekend 2020 in Tampa. That
Hmm.
obviously gets canceled for obvious reasons. It finally happens WrestleMania weekend 2021 in Tampa, which, for better or worse, I mean, wasn't the most exciting of weekends. But I'm obviously glad I went because it means I finally got to have that match. We ended up wrestling 2 more times that year, once in the semifinals of SCI in Chattanooga, and then once just in a standalone match um, for his title in Action Wrestling in Tyrone, Georgia. So he's someone who I feel like we just had really good um, chemistry and we just picked up on each other really, really well. Another person that I got to work with 2021. This is going to be a common theme in this answer. I had a lot of matches in 2021 with people that um, I really got on really well with. Jeremy Wyatt is someone from the Kansas City area who most people would probably know from working St. Louis Anarchy, which you can see all their shows on IWTV. And he's someone who I'm trying to make. I think I met him for the first time. No, I met him for the first time in St. Louis, the first time I wrestled there. But then we also spent some time with one another at SCI in 2021. And then we finally, this is the only time I've ever got to do this, but we worked back to back nights in September of 2021 on a Friday night in St. Louis for St. Louis Anarchy, which is on IWTV, and then a Saturday night for a promotion called Central States Wrestling in Kansas City, which is on YouTube, and had very good matches both nights, totally different from one another.
Hmm.
Um, and the first night was like an Iron Man match, not Iron Man, a pure rules, so the 3 rope breaks and the no closed fists and all that sort of thing. And then the second night was just kind of a standard match as part of a tournament. It was both of our second matches that night. And I loved both of those matches. I loved working with him. The first night was like very kind of meticulously planned. The second night was just let's go out there and wrestle. And I think we had totally different matches that were both really interesting. So he's someone I just think is really underrated on
Hmm.
the indies in general. And then the last answer, which I guess is probably my true answer, and is someone who I get to work with all the time, and I'm just around all the time, and that's Nicole Matthews,
Hmm.
um, who's also based here in Greater Vancouver. Someone that I've known for decades at this point, but we didn't have our first match together until 2021, and we've subsequently only had 3 matches so far. Hoping to have a fourth and final match with her this year at some point before I'm done. Um, but she's someone that I think we think similarly. We have similar influences. Um, we bounce ideas off each other, and both kind of try to improve one another when we're on shows together. Um, Generally speaking, if we're on a show together, it's like we'll see what the other one is doing, so we're not too close to what the other one had in mind, trying
Hmm.
to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the card, but also from one another, just because we work very similarly. Um, so yeah, those are three names that all come to mind, that are people that I all got to wrestle for the first time in 2021. So
That's wonderful. And then of course we get in 2024 seems like the year of rematches for you, which is very exciting. So you've mentioned a few places that 90s shoot style is one of your biggest influences. And then when I was talking to Artemis Spencer, he mentioned you're always telling him to do more catch wrestling in his matches. What is your relationship to that style? What do you like about it? And how were you first exposed to it?
yeah, I do always tell him to do more catch wrestling. He like, so we train a lot together, and like it's funny, like I started getting like a lot of notice in like 2018, 2019 for like incorporating more shoot elements into my matches. And a lot of that just came from being a fan for the majority of my life, like I started watching UFC in 1995. I
Ooh.
somehow I somehow convinced my mom as a preteen that it was okay for me to be ordering UFC pay-per-views. I think she just thought it was wrestling. I don't know that she realized quite exactly what it was at that point.
I mean, UFC
Um,
one close enough.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, now they're all under the same umbrella, um, but yeah. So I've been watching MMA for almost 30 years now. Um, and so that was, I was always drawn to the submissions and the grappling and that sort of thing. Um, and then it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was discovering the Death Valley Driver video review message board and reading those, not just the board, but also reading the issues themselves, the reviews. Um, and those guys were talking a lot about battle arts and UWF and rings and that sort of stuff. And just through buying tapes, battle arts was the first promotion that I really was drawn to, because, and I think it's the easiest of those promotions to get into,
Hmm.
either that or UWFI. Battle Arts doesn't have the point system,
Hmm.
so you don't have to worry about doing math or like understanding the psychology of that. And it's the most like hybrid with traditional pro wrestling,
It's also just
because they're,
visceral as hell. Like
yeah,
combined to because I feel like I've been watching a lot of UWF, specifically Fujiwara recently for a project. And
yeah.
I feel like that's a lot less accessible because it's guys doing very realistic submission grappling versus Ikeda and Ishikawa trying to decapitate each other.
Yeah, the striking is gnarly, and like, yeah, the submit, like, you typically don't see guys just hanging out in a leg lock for 5 minutes, right? Whereas like UWF is very much inspired by like New Japan, obviously, which there was a lot of that with Inoki and crew, just hanging out in leg locks, which I like the nuance of that, right? But is not quite as exciting as like, yeah, the striking is really visceral. You get all sorts of crazy suplexes in battle arts, mostly care of Alexander Otsuka, but um, even Ikeda and Ishikawa and those guys. And then there was also like obviously the influence of I'll say like Lucharesu promotions at the time. Like they had
Hmm.
a working agreement with Michinoku Pro, right, in the late 90s. So you had guys like Ikuta Hodaka and Minoru Tanaka who had like this really flashy junior heavyweight style mixed with the submissions. And like that was the stuff that really drew me in initially, was like the flashy stuff, because I was a teenager
Hmm.
and I didn't quite have the attention span for like the more like brutal stuff, right? Like the main event Ikeda Ishikawa kind of matches. But I came to appreciate that, and then subsequently got into rings, got into UWFI, and then I really didn't see like the 80s UWF stuff until quite a bit later, actually. It was mostly the 90s stuff that really was an influence to me early on.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, God, 25 years ago now. But and then yeah, as far as Arthur Spencer goes, he's just like so legitimately talented that no one realizes like how
Hmm.
good he is, and like
Hmm.
how much knowledge I've picked up from him. And like when I was having all those Thatcher matches, the
Hmm.
original series of Thatcher matches, like I didn't know half as much as I know now, when it came to actual catch wrestling. Um, so that's one thing that's different that I'm looking forward to, is like actually, I mean, Tim could obviously wipe the floor with me in an
Hmm.
actual catch match, but I have a lot more technique now than I did then, and it's all stuff that I learned from Artemis Spencer, who should use more of it when he wrestles.
Using this series of interview to bully him over time.
I don't know that he's
Um,
gonna. Yeah, I mean, if he ever watches this, but I mean, I
yeah.
tell him any chance I get to wrestle him. You know, we've had 5 matches now,
Hmm.
um, and those are like he's one of my favorite opponents as well, for sure. And we had a match that like I think if more people saw it would actually like get a ton of steam behind it. But we had a match in Defy, uh, December, like 3 months ago,
Hmm.
and it was a street fight, which it's because it was originally supposed to be him and Sammy Callahan in a street fight. And Sammy pulled out on short notice. And so I got asked to do it on like 24 hours notice, like legitimately very short notice. Um, and when I got to the building, they were like, "Oh yeah, we still want you to do the street fight because that's what we advertised." So we had this street fight, but we incorporated a ton of like submissions and like shoot, I'll say like positions and scenarios and that sort of thing into a street fight. And I think it's really good and really interesting. And not enough people have seen it. So if you're watching this and you haven't watched me and Artemis Spencer from Defy in a street fight, it's up for free on their like streaming platform thing, Remix or whatever. Um, and I think it's a cool match. So watch it.
All right, let's get the people in the audience to do so. Um, on that note of things you've been influenced by, who is a wrestler that you think not enough people take influence from and why? And you can't say Daniel Makabe, that's cheating.
Oh, I would never say Daniel Makabe. Um, yeah, I would never. I would never say that. Uh, that's a good question. I mean, I always say that he's like Brian Danielson's obviously like one of my favorite
Hmm.
wrestlers, but like lots of people take influence from him, so that's
Yeah.
myself included. But the person that I usually say is my favorite wrestler of all time is the sensational intelligent destroyer, Dick Beyer, who was I mean, his heyday is like the 60s, but we don't have
Hmm.
a ton of footage of him from the 60s because of obviously there isn't a ton from that era. But we have a lot of footage of him from the 70s, mostly in All Japan. And he was in his like 40s then, and he was so good still. And he's so versatile. He works well as a heel, as a baby face, as a masked wrestler. He's like as a vocal performer, like um, that's someone I definitely take influence from. Just like how he interacts with his opponents and with the crowd, like he's so loud in there. He's a technical wrestler, like he's got like amazing technique and like psychology, but like just as an overall performer, I think he's really unheralded, and that's someone who influences me a lot in that kind of sense of how I work.
Hmm.
Um, and but like also he can brawl. Like he has like really interesting matches where he plays like a sympathetic babyface against like Abdullah the Butcher.
Hmm.
but then has these like really good technical matches with like Mil Mascaris and Jumbo Saruta and the Funks and um, Giant Baba. Like he has like these amazing matches with Baba in the '60s where it's like if you only know Baba from like his work in the '80s
Hmm.
and the '90s, where he's like obviously well past his prime, although still has some very good matches. Um, Baba in the '60s was like actually like a decent technical wrestler. So um, there's a ton of his work. I was actually thinking earlier today, like, man, I haven't watched any Destroyer matches in a while. Coming up to, I've kind of been on a bit of a layoff due to some injuries and just life stuff for the last like month and a half. But coming up this weekend, I've got a lot of matches in this next kind of as of when we're recording this. I don't know when this will go up, but
Hopefully within a
uh,
day or two.
okay. Well, starting this weekend, I've got like 5 or 6 straight weekends where I've got at least 1 or 2 matches a weekend. And I was thinking, man, I should revisit those Destroyer matches. Maybe I'll get some ideas. So
So one of the other big elephants in the room in terms of big matches you have coming up is, of course, with Zack Sabre Jr. Um, where does he, oh, obviously he's one of the best in the world, but where does he stack up to others, quote unquote, technical opponents you've had in the past? And is his style something, well, rather, how do you want to approach his style? Because he has maybe some of the, because I think technical wrestling to some extent is kind of a bullshit term because it can go for a really, really wide range of things. And he has some of the most like pretty mat work I've ever seen. And it seems like with you, you like to sometimes make that mat work a little uglier. And I'm wondering, do you want to take it? You want to take it to his game, or do you want to make it ugly?
I always want to make it ugly.
Hmm.
That's the thing, right. Like my goal is like first and foremost struggle, right? Struggle.
Hmm.
I probably the last time we talked, I probably said this.
Yep.
Struggle is like the most important thing to me, especially in technical wrestling, right? I want it to seem like it's not cooperative. I want it to feel like, not necessarily that it's a real fight, but it's like it's an athletic contest, right?
Hmm.
And so yeah, always want to leave my fingerprints on a match and one of those big things, even if it's not like a shoot style or a technical style. If I'm working with someone who doesn't work that style and I'm just having to, our styles are mixing, right? A high flyer or someone who's more of just like a character, good guy, bad guy, that sort of thing, right?
Hmm.
I always want there to be struggle involved. Um, so yes, that will definitely be on like the menu for that match. Uh, Before anyone really knew who I was, and I was just working Seattle in like the mid 2010s, Zack Sabre Jr. was like my primary influence. He was
Hmm.
someone that like I unabashedly ripped off. Um, like really annoyingly so.
Hmm.
Um, I remember like the first time I met Tim Thatcher and was explaining to him like, oh, like I really like Zack Sabre and here's some moves that I do, and he's sort of like, oh yeah, it sounds like you really like Zack Sabre, and it's like, oh yeah, shit. And so, if you had told me in like 2015 that I was wrestling Zack Sabre, I would have been like over the moon.
Hmm.
With that being said, I'm glad that it's not happening until 2024. I have
Hmm.
a bit more of my own identity. I'm not just some Zack Sabre knockoff. Um, and, I've learned and I've traveled and I've, really kind of established myself. Um, I think Saber is someone who's kind of polarizing nowadays. There's like some
Hmm.
people who like think he's just like the best technical wrestler ever. And there's some people that think that it's like high spot technical wrestling, like
Hmm.
that there's not enough struggle or things established, or he doesn't like really work holds, he's so like fluid and like
Hmm.
he is like the most I think accessible technical wrestler on earth, right? Like if
Hmm.
you have someone who just watches Raw or just watches AEW, like doesn't watch the indies, it, isn't scouring, YouTube or torrents or whatever for, obscure,
Hmm.
lucha or Japanese wrestling or indies or whatever. You show them a Zack Sabre match and that's someone they can be like, whoa, this guy is he's obviously very talented. He's obviously very skilled. Everything he does looks painful. Don't get me wrong. It does not like it looks like it's pretty, but it also,
Hmm.
it feels like it has intent. Um, but there's also people who argue that, what he does isn't, it's very, it's too fluid and it doesn't feel like a real contest almost. So I'm genuinely interested to see how our styles match up. Like I think that he also doesn't work a ton of indies. Like he
Hmm.
barely works in America nowadays, right? So just the fact that it's happening, I had given up the idea of ever wrestling him in like 2019. Like once he
Hmm.
basically moves full time to Japan and is like a New Japan guy, it's like, well, this guy doesn't do indies anymore. I'll never get a chance to wrestle him. Um, and I was fine with that. I'm honestly, I'm legitimately. That's the only match coming up that I'm like, holy crap, what have you gotten yourself into? Like I've wrestled Thatcher before. I know what that's like.
Hmm.
There's other cool first time opponents I'm really looking forward to in the next couple weeks. Edith Surreal, Trisha Dora. There's probably someone I'm forgetting. A couple things haven't been announced, I guess. Um, but Saber's the only one where it's like, okay, you're gonna have to work. And so
Hmm.
I've been the last couple months like I've been rehabbing from injuries, but like I've also been trying to put as much time as possible into doing cardio at the gym because I
Hmm.
I know that he goes like a mile a minute and it's going to be exhausting. And that's good though. That's good for me. I need to be sometimes you need to be challenged to, really um, feel like you've accomplished something.
Hmm.
And if I just kind of went in there and just rested on my laurels, like, yeah, he's Zack Sabre, but like I'm pretty good too. It's like, no, like I need to like really put in some work and hopefully, I'm excited for it. It's 5 days after my 40th birthday. I'm
Hmm.
wrestling Zack Sabre. So happy birthday to me, I guess. But
It's one hell of a
um
gift.
one hell of a gift. Honestly, my wife is more excited than I am. She loves Zack Sabre. She can't wait. So yeah,
She rooting for him.
probably. Probably. She hasn't said that to me, but probably she will be on the night of. She will be. Yeah.
Where does the idea of wrestling in soccer jerseys come from?
You know what? It came from, so this would have been 2017 is when I first started doing it, like early 2017, a couple months before the first Thatcher match. And at that point, I was, for lack of a better term, one of those trash bag wrestlers. Black t-shirt and I kind of a look very inspired by um, the indie wrestling era of Kevin Steen, Kevin Owens, whatever
Hmm.
you call him, right? Singlet, black shirt, and then, boots, knee pads, whatever, right? And it's sort of like, well, this looks fine. And then you know what? I wrestled Brutal Bob Evans in the fall of 2016, and he was one of the first like names that I ever got to work with. Someone not from my area, someone who was obviously more experienced and better than me. And we worked on a show that like no one ever saw.
Hmm.
It was filmed, but like tape never came out. And it was my first match back after hurting my foot. I broke my foot in the summer of 2016. And it was one of my first singles matches back. And the promoter was like, yeah, I want you guys to do a 30-minute draw. I'm coming back from a broken foot. I haven't been able to do cardio. And you want me to do 30 minutes with this guy? And so we had a 30-minute match and it was fun. I bet you if I watched it back now, I would cringe at a lot of what I did in the moment because you know, I wasn't nearly as good as I am now. But after, the best part of the experience was afterwards sitting backstage with him and he just kind of broke it all down for me. Like, here's things that you do well, here's things that you need to improve on. And here's how you can improve on those things. And like the first thing he said to me, he's like, it's like the look is the shits. Like you look like the
Mm-hmm.
shits. You need to improve on that. You know, obviously need to be putting more work in the gym, but also like just the whole presentation, you know? And so it was like, I hate to admit that. I don't hate to admit because, he's someone who I really like his work, but I don't want people to get the wrong impression. But it was seeing Chris Hero,
Mm-hmm.
then Cassius Ono working in NXT, and he started wearing basketball jerseys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was because, obviously he's not a body guy. I'm not a body guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, okay, I'm not a basketball fan, but I am a soccer fan. And this is something that is unique, can be customized, and it looks athletic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, they're comfortable to wrestle in too. It's much more comfortable than just a regular cotton t-shirt because they're meant to be worn and like sweat in for 90 minutes, right? So, um, it just started as well, this is something I can do. It just is a little bit more unique. And then it kind of took off from there. Fans got into it.
Mm-hmm.
When I go over to Europe, I was getting gifts from fans of people giving me, their team that they supported. You know, they were getting me custom jerseys, which are not cheap. Um, and it just kind of became my own unique thing. Now, there's one other guy who does it in Ontario named Alessandro Bruno, who's an Italian. He does like an Italian soccer gimmick,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it'd be cool to wrestle him someday as the two guys who wrestle in soccer shirts. But yeah, I've made it my own. And like I know there are people who don't like it. I've had opponents tell me like, "Oh, I don't get it. I don't like it. I think it looks cheap." It's, okay, that's fine. But it has worked for me.
What is your favorite move in your arsenal aside from the fastball punch or the Makabe lock?
Oh, I am really a sucker for a good bridging suplex.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a couple that I throw. Like just a regular German suplex with a bridge, I think is underrated. I really like throwing a tiger suplex, which is the double chicken wing,
Mm-hmm.
as made famous by the Tiger Masks, but also Ultimo Dragon used it a lot and that's probably the first person that I saw use it was watching Ultimo Dragon in WCW using a tiger suplex. Um, and then I have another one that I've never really settled on what to call it. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know who invented it. I had a friend of mine who would just send me random gifts of like cool looking moves saying like, hey, you can maybe do this. And it was a Japanese woman, as most cool moves are invented by Japanese women, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's almost like a leg hook where you grab the one leg and then kind of go behind and bar it across their like lower midsection. Um, and then German suplex them from there. So that one I've used and I've called it either like a seat belt or I've called it like
Mm-hmm.
a J hook because it like makes their leg kind of shaped like a J. Um, I should probably come up with a name for it. No one else does it besides
Mm-hmm.
the woman that I stole it from and me. So it's a little bit more unique than a German suplex or a tiger suplex. I wish I knew the name of the person who invented it. I should figure that out probably.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, a good bridging suplex, I think goes a long way. So
So on the note of moves, my editor asked me to ask, how did that table spot with Tyrant hurt? How bad was that? I believe it's a swanton bomb onto a table, and it does not give away, and it looks like one of the worst things I've seen a human being experience.
you've seen it.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Who asked you to ask that?
my editor, Sam the VA mod.
Oh, okay. Uh Yeah, that sucked. That's there's no mincing words with that. For anyone who's not seen it, it was a backyard show 17 years ago. Actually, almost to this day. It was March of 2007, and maybe this coming week it would be
Mm-hmm.
17 years. And we had set up like a table, kind of using some guardrails that were incorporated into the entranceway. And he literally dove off a balcony over the entranceway in a swanton onto me, and just like table did not give at all. And he just hit me and bounced off. His landing probably sucked worse than mine, to be fair. But and like, what would that balcony have been? I mean, it wasn't like maybe 10 feet, but then he also had to kind of go outwards too to like clear the entranceway. So, it was 10 feet down, and he probably went a good like 6 to 8 feet outwards to
Oh
like
God.
that guy was someone. He does do some indies still in the UK. He's also like a really pop, like I think he's a famous Twitch streamer now.
Yeah, that's Sam has done esports production with him.
Yeah, I knew he was into esports. I haven't seen him in years though. Really nice guy, and like super just like naturally talented. Um, and yeah, that sucked. Yeah, there's no mincing words there. I wish there was better quality video footage of that. Like all
Hmm.
that stuff, all of my stuff from like the early 2000s, like a lot of it is obviously like it's not high definition, right? But
Hmm.
I'm glad it's captured on tape nonetheless. So
What is your biggest pet peeve in pro wrestling?
how much
Oh.
time do I have? You know what? Um, this is like some serious inside baseball stuff.
Hmm.
So like this probably wouldn't be obvious to I mean, sometimes it becomes obvious to just people watching. And it's more so an issue, obviously, on the indies, right? Which is all I really have experience with. But it's people going over their time.
Hmm.
And I feel like more and more egregiously as years go on. Um, you know, I've been on shows where like a promoter has given me an amount of time for my match that I feel it's like, well, this kind of sucks. I was hoping I'd have a little bit more time, but usually there's ways to manipulate the situation and maximize your time. But it feels like more and more now than ever, wrestlers either one just don't know how to put a match together to fit the time that they've been given.
Hmm.
Um, and two, like some people who are like long-standing wrestlers, like people who have been working shows forever, they know how to do this, but they just don't care. They're like, well,
Hmm.
no, this is what I had in mind. I don't care what the promoter wants me to do. Like the promoter is the person who's paying you, right? They're the ones whose show it is. They're the ones who are, putting this all together and giving us the platform. Like, yes, there's a whole labor versus employer argument to be had, right? They obviously can't have a show without us, right? But
Hmm.
when they are putting this show together, they have, a runtime in mind, right? And like they want the show to exist within this, its own universe, within its own time frame. Um, and so yeah, it's just frustrating because I've been on shows that, you end up being late on a show, and by the time you get out there, the crowd is just they're exhausted. There's a reason why like I don't think independent shows should be longer than 2.5 hours. Um, but some people just don't care about the greater good or
Hmm.
their fellow wrestlers. It's like, oh well, no, I have 8, and that's bullshit. I should have 15, so I'm going to go 15. It's, well, no, you don't need to go 15. I can have a kick-ass 8-minute match. Those Thatcher matches, like all of them are under 15 minutes. They're all like 13 to 15 in that ballpark. Like my match with Jonathan Gresham is 14 minutes. I've had I'm trying to think of other examples, but like, I've had some very good, compelling matches that are under 10. Um, you don't need 20 plus to have like an exciting match. You just need to know where you need to edit and where you can, like, yes, we have more time to do this. We are going to have less time to do this. You can't
Hmm.
necessarily have it all, nor should you want to. I don't, you know, I don't want to watch the best wrestlers in the world wrestle for 25 minutes most of the time, let alone whoever on some local indie. I don't need to see you wrestle for 25 minutes. Sometimes I don't need to see you wrestle for 15. The reason you have 8 minutes is because that's the amount of time that you can have your best match possible on it. And, it helps when shows are being run by people who have wrestled, certainly. I've been on lots of shows that are timed out and put together by people who don't have a clue because they've never actually wrestled before.
Hmm.
Um, but I've also been on shows that are timed out and put together by people who have never wrestled before, and they totally get it. Like, he doesn't need any more praise, but like one of my best friends in the world is Dylan Hales, who, works for IWTV, but also helps run TWE, has previously helped run SCI, SUP, helps out with action. He's never stepped foot in a ring in his life, but he gets it. And those shows don't overstay their welcome. Those shows in the South that, I can't tell you about a show I've worked on in the South where I went, man, that felt like it was a little long in the tooth, because they
Hmm.
get it. And it's elsewhere where everyone's like, well, let's book this like it's PWG or Ring of Honor, and the shows go 4 hours and every match goes 2 minutes or 20 minutes. It's not necessary. You don't need it. So yeah, timing. That's a big pet peeve.
All things considered, as we look at the end of your in-ring career, if money, all that weren't a factor, would you want to be a trainer or booker if you had the chance?
Uh, I've had people offer me both of those things and I've turned them down. Um, I like working with young talent. I've done my best that I can to help local young talent here in Greater Vancouver.
Hmm.
Try to get better, improve their skill sets, incorporate more technical wrestling into what they do. There's too many people to name, but Travis Williams, Judas Icarus, Elliot Tyler, uh, Liza Hall. There's people I'm forgetting, I'm sure, but all people that I love working with and seek out my, advice whenever they have the opportunity. They ask me, "Hey, can you watch my match? Hey, can you give me some feedback? Hey, can we go to the school and work on some things together?" Um, I have all of the time in the world for that. And once I'm done taking bumps and having matches on shows, I will still have the time in the world for that. Where I struggle is imparting what I feel I do really well, which is nuance and technique. I struggle to impart that onto large groups. I want to be there in the ring with you, showing you firsthand, this is how this works. You know, it's hard for me to do that with like 12 people and be like, okay, one by one, let's get in the ring and I'm going to show you this hold. Okay, you sort of get it. Okay, now put it on me. Oh, okay, yeah, you kind of get it. Okay, now you go sit on the sidelines and watch while the 11 other people do it, right? So I've only ever done one seminar ever before.
Hmm.
In hindsight, I don't love how it went. Um, I'm sure I will do more seminars in the future. I wish I enjoyed the process more because it's a way that I can make money
Hmm.
um, still. And I have one promotion who has asked me to do it multiple times. I was on the books for doing one with them, and then I had an injury that made it not possible. And I'm sure if we get the chance, I will do one for them this year. But it's it's really nerve wracking for me. It makes me
Hmm.
anxious that I'm not doing a good job. Um, so and like the school, we've got a great school here, the Lionsgate Dojo in Greater Vancouver, run by Artem Spencer, Nicole Matthews, Tony Baroni, and Billy Swade. We're all really good pro wrestlers, some of whom have traveled a little bit more than others, but and all just really good people. And I live 10 minutes from the school. I'm at the school all the damn time. And they've told me, like, man, you should teach classes here, or, just even if it's not regularly, but just every so often. I'm sure I will do that eventually. I'm just not there yet. I'm not ready to do it. So
Hmm. So maybe in the future.
maybe in the
Uh,
future. Booking, no. I'm
Yeah.
good. I'm good. I've helped out. I helped out a lot with booking for Three Twin Battle back in the day. People would bounce ideas off of me, and I was kind of like a quality control, like this makes sense here. Maybe switch the order of these matches on the card. This match should get a little bit more time than this match. This would be a good idea for a finish. I'm good with finishes. I've had people come up to me and say, "Hey, can you help us agent a match?"
Hmm.
Or and again, I'll do that for my friends if they ask me. But I've also had people who have said, "Hey, can you watch my match and then give me some notes afterwards?" And then when
Hmm.
I've gone to do that, they've interrupted me in the midst of giving them notes saying, "Oh yeah, okay, I gotta go now. I gotta go. I want to go see some fans or meet some girls or whatever."
Hmm.
And it's like, cool, I'm never gonna do this for you again, friend. So
So in 2003, a wrestler emerged from the ether and then disappeared from the face of the earth. His name, Lincoln Page.
yes,
Who was Lincoln Page?
I was Lincoln Page.
Yep.
Lincoln
Oh,
Page. Was that sorry? Was that the end of the question, or did you have
oh
more
yeah,
to
yeah,
pick
yeah,
up
yeah.
on?
No, no. It was just explain because one he's listed as existing for one match and one match only. Why that ring name only once?
I think there's maybe three Lincoln Page matches. The first
Hmm.
one's on YouTube. You can watch
Hmm.
it. Uh, the other two, one was a battle royal and one was a squash. Me getting squashed, not me winning a squash. Um, Lincoln Page was I was working. I just finished training at my local school and started working shows here for a company called All Star Wrestling, and trying to come up with a name, not wanting to use Daniel Makabe because that had been my backyard name, and
Hmm.
it was taboo at that point to have backyarded. Um, and the gimmick was going to be like someone who was like very online, basically what I was and I am still to this day, right? Like someone who like YouTube didn't exist yet, but like was a tape trader who watched wrestling from all over the world. So he knew all these styles and he knew all these holds and like he read message boards. So, like it was like this kind of hybrid, like he's a nerd, but also he's kind of a savant. Like that was the idea
Oh, so he's Brian
behind,
Danielson.
I guess so, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was like a more like cartoon, like
Hmm.
WWE-ified version of that, right? And so the name is like it's a pun, right? It's link on page, web link, web page, because he was a message board nerd, right? I wrestled in a Death Valley Driver Ken the Box t-shirt, Mokujin Ken. Uh, I wore baggy UFO pants, as was the style, not so much here, but on the East Coast indies, like the Ring of Honor undercards, like Special K, those guys all wore those UFO pants. A lot of wrestlers in like CZW and Jersey All Pro and IWA Mid South, stuff that I was watching, stuff that me and my friends desperately wanted to do. Like we were inspired by guys like Hero and Punk and Cabana and Alex Shelley, who I'm very lucky to have gone to wrestle twice, and all of those guys. The only one of which who was kind of a baggy pants guy was Hero at one point.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I was a baggy pants wrestler, which was not cool at all here. Everyone was sort of like, "What the hell is this rave wear?" Like I had to mail order it. You couldn't buy it in stores here. Um, but yeah, that's Lincoln Page. And then honestly, what happened was local indie wrestling just kind of sucked, and me
Hmm.
and my friends didn't enjoy it, and we were like, let's go back to backyarding. That's more fun and fulfilling, and so we did that for a bunch of years. So like technically, am I a 20-year vet? Yes, I guess so. I had my first
Hmm.
professional wrestling match over 20 years ago, but I did not. I wasn't working indies for like most of the 2000s and early 2010s. It wasn't until like 2014 that I started working indies again. So
Aside from how to most efficiently destroy your body, what did you learn from backyard wrestling that kind of informed your career going forward?
honestly, like the best thing that came of it was like the friendships and the connections that I made from it, right? And like a lot of those people ended up being movers and shakers in independent wrestling, like so I met a lot of friends who I then ended up getting like help get me booked on the East Coast, um, and like help me break out outside of this region. So that was important and informative to my career, quote unquote. Um, yeah, I don't know what else had helped me really learn. Like I did destroy my body for sure.
Yeah.
Taking a lot of bumps that I wouldn't take now. Um, but I was always kind of like the technical guy too. I was always known as like the best technical guy in our like community. So um, I tried to incorporate a lot of that technique into like the crazy moves and stuff, and try and make the crazy moves have like meaning and context, which is like stuff I still do, right? I still bust
Mm-hmm.
out like the big top rope Frankensteiner and stuff. I still do that from time to time. I probably have one more of those in me this year. So, um, but um, yeah, it was just there were some good messages to be had and learned
Mm-hmm.
from that community, and there's like a lot of bad habits that people picked up in that community as well. But honestly, it's just the camaraderie and the fun. You know, wrestling can be fun. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't always feel it's funny. I used to get accused back then of like not having fun, just being more concerned with having like quote unquote good matches. And I still am concerned with being like having quote unquote good matches. If I'm not having the best match on a show I'm on, I'm genuinely disappointed. I feel like I should be having the best matches on the shows that I'm on, which is becoming harder and harder as I'm working on shows with more and more good wrestlers, and like I'm obviously slowing down. But it's still the goal. But at the same time, if I'm not having the best matches possible on these shows and also having fun, then what am I doing? Right? It should be fun.
Mm-hmm. So last question here, quite simply put. So obviously, because I could ask the question, have you done everything you wanted to do? And I know that's never going to be true because there's always something else you want to do. But how do you feel about the legacy you've left in professional wrestling and going into July where you'll be ending your career? How you feeling regarding that?
Definitely haven't accomplished everything that I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Never got to wrestle in Japan, never got to wrestle in Mexico. Those are the big ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would have liked to have gone back to Europe one more time. It looked like it was going to happen, and then it just logistically it just didn't work out or make sense. Um, I never expected to do anything. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I got trained in 2003. I worked a handful of matches. I thought this is no fun. I'd rather do backyarding. So I did that for many, many years. And then when I started working indies again, like 10 years later, it was just sort of like, oh, well, this is fun. This is fun. I'm having fun with my friends. That's all this is. This is my thing I do on the weekends with my friends once or twice a month. Um, and then genuinely everything that's happened in the last 7 years since that first Thatcher match is like cherry on top stuff, like because I had zero expectations. I honestly didn't want to get trained. I was backyarding with my friends in like the early 2000s, 2001, 02. And I remember saying like, yeah, I mean, other people can get trained, but that doesn't really appeal to me. I don't think I'm going to be an independent wrestler. Because there was no one on the independents like me, like
Mm-hmm.
I've never been a body guy. I'm just kind of like an awkward, nerdy looking person, and in 2001 that wasn't cool or like socially acceptable on the indies, I guess. Um, and so, I mean, if anything, my legacy of being like, if you have the passion for it, and like you need to have some like ability to like, I'm not one of these people who says like wrestling can be for everybody or anyone can do it. I don't think so. There are a lot of people, you can try it and you should try it. If you feel like you want to try it, try it. It doesn't mean you're going to be good or that you're going to have any kind of longevity or any kind of lasting impact, right? You
Mm-hmm.
need to want to get better. You need to have some kind of either physical ability or mental ability, understanding of how this works, and be able to like connect with human beings, fans, other wrestlers, whatever. So but if my lasting impact is that like, hey, this guy from Vancouver who really doesn't look like much but obviously has some kind of understanding of how this works is able to travel all over the world and make genuine connections with other wrestlers and fans and inspire people. If that's the case, I think it is. Maybe I don't like to toot my own horn too much, That's why when you said I can't name myself
Yeah.
as the most influential, I don't think I am, but I like to think that I've influenced someone,
Hmm.
and that's cool.
Hmm.
That's exciting. To feel appreciated and a sense of accomplishment. It's not always the easiest thing for me to do. My wife has to remind me all the time that like a lot of people love you,
Hmm.
you know, like people who know you personally love you, but like people who don't really know you just know what you present to people. They genuinely love and connect with you and your work. And that's crazy, That's
Hmm.
I never let alone getting to like meet and wrestle my heroes like Negro
Hmm.
Navarro and Yuki Ishikawa and Tim Thatcher. Honestly, like he was absolutely my favorite wrestler on the indies when I got to wrestle him. And
And now Zack Sabre Jr.
Zack Sabre, Zack Sabre Jr. That's crazy, crazy. 2015, if you told me I was going to wrestle Zack in 9 years' time, like never would have, never would have expected that. And yeah, it's all, and then, like none of it feels real at times, and none of it was expected, or, it's not like I had a chip on my shoulder, like I'm this talented, I
Hmm.
really deserve the world. Um, no one, I worked hard at times, and I'm very lucky to have met the people that I have who have had a positive influence on me, both as a professional wrestler and as a human being, and have opened doors for me to be able to travel and make the connections that I have. But yeah, none of it was expected, and none of it is underappreciated. I assure you. I appreciate it all. So
Do you
yeah.
know when you're going to be able to announce the opponent?
I don't know when they want to. Like, I
All
think
right.
that's something I got to figure out with SCI.
Hmm.
We've talked about maybe after WrestleMania weekend, just because there's so much happening between now and then that it's like that'll get lost in the shuffle if it happens before then. So
Is there a reason
that,
that specifically SCI is going to be your last match?
yeah, because it felt like I didn't have a true home to have it here in the
Hmm.
Northwest. Nowhere in Canada feels like my home. Seattle, again, not really. 3-2-1's been gone for over 4 years now. I wasn't a Defy guy. I've had two matches ever for Defy, and I
Hmm.
even still have moral conflicts about working for them, just my own personal crap, not anything anyone
Hmm.
should be worried about. The spiritual successor to 3-2-1 is a promotion called SOS, which is based in Tacoma, Washington, which is like 30 miles south of Seattle. And I've worked for them multiple times, and a lot of my friends still work and run that place. And I've had some very good matches, there. I wrestled Brian Keith there, which I'm very thankful that I got that chance.
Hmm.
But even that, their fan base doesn't really feel like home to me. Honestly, the promotion or the city where I get the best reaction in the Northwest now is Portland, which is crazy. But like the prestige crowds and the DOA crowds in Portland have been really warming and accommodating to me. And that's crazy to me because like Portland's like 6 hours from here. It's not that
Hmm.
close, but it also just doesn't feel like the right place to have my last match ever. But SCI feels like home. Chattanooga feels like home. I never go there and come away feeling disappointed, like, oh man, they really weren't excited to see me. They're always excited to see me. The fans are just so nice and genuine. And that room, the TWE arena, just reminds me so much of the Battle Palace 3-2-1 battles, venue. It's fans on three sides of the ring. It's like 200, maybe 250 max. And like, that's my favorite kind of room to wrestle in, honestly. Small crowds where you can hear every little comment, but they also can connect with all of the little things that you're doing. Um, and just after winning SCI 2019, that's when was the real turning point for me becoming like a guy on the
Hmm.
indies. SCI was the first time an indie promoter paid for a flight for me, SCI 2019. So um, it just felt like the right place. So I'm looking forward to it.
That makes sense. That's all I had to ask. Thanks again so much for taking now like an hour of your time to sit down and talk to me. Is there
No,
anything else you want to say?
no. If you don't already, you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Daniel Makabe. That's when you'll find out about all my last matches in the next 4 months. I've got some coming up. Prestige this coming Sunday. That'll be on IWTV at some point. Dusk Pro Wrestling the following Friday against Trisha Dora. Prestige is against G Sharp, who's really good. He's from Vegas. Trisha Dora for Dusk. That'll be on YouTube at some point. WrestleMania weekend, obviously, versus Edith Surreal and Tim Thatcher. Both those shows will be live on IWTV. The following weekend against Zack Sabre Jr. That'll be live on IWTV. And then I'm taking a month off because I'm getting married. I say wife. We're technically already married, but our proper wedding is in May. So you won't.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. So you won't see me on any shows in May, and then June we're getting started back up again. I've definitely got some irons in the fire already, places that I'm going to go for one last time, and then July 12th, SCI night one, first time ever non-tournament main event for night one. Is going to be me and one person who I have wrestled before. It is a rematch. It's not a first time match. I will say that much. And it's one of my best friends that I've met in this crazy independent wrestling world. And we're going to have a kick ass match. And then everyone will be really sad, myself included. And then night two will happen and I'll be hanging out. And then, yeah, then I'll be done wrestling for forever, which is okay.
All right.